Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Accomplices for Justice, take 14, if you can imagine
I
how
can't imagine.
confused that we have gotten this far. Um, so, we are here on Wednesday, September 4th, in sunny and beautiful autumnal Western New York on the
Mm,
first day of school for Pastor Hughes' kids.
mm,
Exciting for that. Uh,
yes.
and Reverend Dr. Wiley Hughes is the senior pastor of Orchard Park Presbyterian Church in Orchard Park, New York, known for, in the coming weeks, being the home field advantage of the Buffalo Bills, because of course we are in Bills
Yes.
season.
Oh, yeah. It's already started.
And I am Jonathan Freirish, rabbi of, also in Buffalo, and the executive director of something called Open Door Judaism. And actually, everyone here on our call today is a supporter, a contributor to our wherewithal at Accomplices for Judaism. And we are so grateful for you. And anybody who wants to help support, just go to opendoorjudaism.org. That's opendoorjudaism.org. And you can find ways to support us there, or to our Patreon site, found at Accomplices for Justice on Patreon. In any event, our topic today is one that is not necessarily so easy, as I said before, for two guys to enter into. Um, we are in this amazing place in our electoral cycle where we have an African American woman as the lead candidate for one of our major parties. And I asked this question to Reverend Hughes a couple weeks ago. I said, so how is this affecting men in the Black church in terms of patriarchy and misogyny and gender and all that sort of stuff? And I'm going to ask it sort of more broadly, how's it affecting all of us in general? And so to get us started off, one of the podcasts I occasionally listen to, hello Nanette, is the Ezra Klein show on New York Times. And Ezra Klein had a guest a couple weeks ago, right during the convention, the Democratic convention, named Christine Emba, EMBA, and she's a staff writer at The Atlantic and the author of a book called Rethinking Sex: A Provocation. And this was her sort of final thought on
Provocation.
this question. Uh, she said, um, in the past, Republicans have put themselves forward as the party of masculinity. The Democrats, the liberals, are sort of the female party. But Tim Walz versus that vision of masculinity is turning that vision on its head. In the same way that Republicans seem to have gone from the party of freedom to the anti-freedom party, they have also gone from the party of real masculinity, of men who shoot guns and work in the yard, to, I don't know, World Wrestling Federation performers.
Mm.
Whereas Democrats seem to have gone, or are trying to go, from a party of feminized soy boys, as they used to be insulted by Republicans, to, yes, the party of Tim Walz, a dad who wears a camouflage hat. The memes circulating of him online are of a guy from the Midwest who's straight talking, loves eating meat, and will help you fix your car when it's on the side of the road. And this is a vision of masculinity that is still very stereotypically masculine. He's a football coach, he was in the military, but also positive. One might call it tonic masculinity. He's male, but he's helpful. He supports women, but he says he's not trying to be in their business and legislate how they should use their uteri. He talked about in his interviews how he views the Republican Party as having become what he termed the He-Man Woman Haters Club, as opposed to presumably his party, the Democratic Party, where men are there and they're helpful, but they also love women. So this is a vision of masculinity that I think Democrats think will play across America. It's a very recognizable one, but it's a friendly one. It's a down-to-earth one. It's not a frightening one in the same way that Donald Trump was trying to portray, but an approachable one. So, Pastor Hughes,
Yes.
as the man's man of the two of us, after all, you are certainly a former football player. You
Yeah.
are uh, a decorated Marine who served in
Yeah.
Fallujah. Uh, you don't have a history of doing effeminate sports like downhill skiing like I do. Uh, so what do you think about the Tim Walz' updated version of masculinity that we're now seeing in the Harris campaign?
You know, I'm glad you asked me that. I don't see it as, and this is, gosh, I have so much to say about that. I don't see it as, you use the word, I can't remember the word you actually use. It's always been here. I think the masculinity that Tim Walz exudes is real masculinity. It's true masculinity. It's the kind of masculinity that we've always had. I think it is he's the kind of guy that we all, if we're not right now, this is the guy we want to be. Okay. Um, and so when people say, well, there's this new masculinity, or, it's a more tonic masculinity, I would even argue with that. I would even say it's real masculinity. He's a man. He's a good man and a real man. You talk about all of the masculine things that I've done, and yet I don't wear those on my sleeve. I don't talk about how good I was as a Marine. I don't talk about how much yards I ran as a running back in football. I don't, because I don't have to, right? I don't have to. That's not a part of who I am. Um, yeah, I brag about it when I'm with other guys because that's what men do, but it's not something that we wear. And when we even see men who have been there, who have done those things, when I particularly see men who wear their battles on their sleeves, I even think of that as a bit odd and a bit toxic, even to say that you served in the military, but must everyone know? What are
Hmm.
you compensating? What are you compensating for? You have the biggest car on the street. What are you compensating for? You
Dare
know?
we say, as former President Obama said, an obsession with crowd size?
Yes, yeah, crowd sizes, right? Yeah. So that's sort of my take on it. I think Tim Walz is an example of what a man has always at least aspired to be. I mean, we're all not perfect. We all make mistakes. I'm pretty sure Tim Walz have made some mistakes too. I'm pretty sure he has, you know, stepped over or stepped under what it means to be a man, because we're all imperfect. But I do think that he is the kind of guy that we all are, and that most men are. Um, and I think it's a good thing that he is getting that sort of spotlight, because we don't see that often.
So I'm going to push back on this
Okay.
because so we live in a country that it has a number of original sins.
Mm,
Uh, we talk about anti-black slavery as one of the original sins. We can talk about anti-indigenous genocide as one of the original sins, and we have to talk about misogyny as one of the original sins,
mm,
patriarchy itself.
mm-hmm,
So what I think is very interesting is for both you and me, what we define as quote unquote traditional masculinity, uh, I think is in fact an updated masculinity.
mm,
And I think that we have two new phenomena here. We have the masculinity that's developed, I would, and as an outsider, I can say in large part in your spheres, which is which is very different from President Obama's masculinity because you and President Obama have very different backgrounds. So as a black man in this country, the things that you just titled as normative for masculinity are things that have been accused of towards the African American community as not having, right? Because
mm.
in the sphere of what you're talking about, go back to the Moynihan report that said, we have um, a family structure under duress, and that, and then if you look at what's the again external portrayal of African American culture by American culture, where we have absentee fathers, right? Where we have President Obama, as Brittany Cooper pointed out, hailing the importance of attending towards boys and men in the African American community, but not women, right? So we have My Brother's
Well,
Keeper, and
uh,
yeah, it's complicated. I
yeah.
But
Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
whereas white masculinity, right, the stereotypical white masculinity, the 1950s masculinity that all these Republican men seem to be hailing back to, also was undergirded by a certain degree of responsibility and, dare we say, in its best forms, grace, right? Grace of taking upon oneself the responsibility for others in a way that didn't say, I'm going to make decisions for you either. So a more generous, but still, our 1950s white masculinity is still patriarchy. It's still sexist. It's and now we have these two reactions: the masculinity of Tim Walz that you identified as normative masculinity from your perspective, which I'm on board with, and sort of the reactionary J.D. Vance masculinity, sort of caricatured by Trump, of, I'm in charge, women need to do what I say type of stuff, which is anathema to you and me. I mean, you and I, if we were to take that to our houses, we would be kicked out immediately.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the worst thing too, right?
Or
That
or
would be
or
the
or as
beginning.
or as Kinney said, no, you would never be kicked out. The question is how much pain you would have
It,
before you died.
before, yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. I'd love to. Yeah, kick me out. I'll take that.
So so we are in this moment of divergent attempts to cope with a better modern masculinity in the face of a changing society.
Okay, let me interject here. I hear what you're saying, but I think, and especially when it comes to African American, what you called hyper masculinity, I'm acknowledging that, but I think when it comes to patriarchy, I think what the idea of masculinity for the African American is heavily propagandized, and I think it's not a true reflection of black masculinity. It is heavily hyper mask. We have been hyper. We're always so aggressive. This is propaganda. Black people,
Mhm.
black men are no more aggressive than white men, no more aggressive than Latino men, and have historically never been any more aggressive. But we have been stereotyped to be aggressive, and unfortunately, sometimes the stereotypes are achieved. So, unfortunately, we play into those stereotypes even as black men. But again, it's not the norm, right? It's just not, and it has never been.
Well, Brittany Cooper and Morgan Jerkins. So I read both their books in preparation for today. Really worthwhile books. Eloquent Rage, Brittany
Mm,
Cooper's book, and Morgan Jerkins' book, This Will Be My Undoing. Brittany Cooper points out that the concern about the aggressive nature of African American men didn't stop Southern white men from leaving their homes in their care when they went to fight the Civil War.
okay.
That concern only came when those men returned home disempowered as
Mm,
slave owners.
hmm
So that is so that Nanette wants to interject here on the topic of projected black men and aggression. Of course, this
All
is
right. Trouble.
absolutely, Nanette. Go ahead.
Trouble. We're in
Well,
trouble.
I'm not causing trouble, not quite yet. But
Good trouble.
not quite
Good,
yet.
good trouble. Good
And,
trouble.
and I do want to, I want to insist, Rabbi Freiberg, that usually you guys talk until 12:45 and you leave 15 minutes for us.
Yes.
But on this topic, I think it's so important to include the women,
That's what I said at the
on
outset,
this
Nanette.
call. Yeah.
I already made the appeal to all of our women supporters
Oh, okay. That's what
to
I get for being
participate at.
late. That's what
No
I get for
worries.
being late. Talk about black stereotypes. Anyhow, I was just having dinner the other day with a white friend of mine, and he was talking about having belonged to a fraternity when he was in college. And he said, we were talking about hazing and the dangers of hazing. And he said, the white fraternities in my college weren't as bad, quote, quote, he said bad, as the black fraternities, because the black fraternities actually brand people. Now, I missed the whole fraternity sorority thing when I was in college. So I know that there are a couple of black fraternities that they actually put a brand on your arm. And I had to stop, I had to call him out on that. I said, you know, we've heard in the news about, you know, white sororities who had a kid drink until they died. So what is the difference between that and putting a brand on somebody? And he went right into white fragility. Well, I didn't really mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I didn't really mean, and I had to really break it down for him and say, you know, violence is violence.
Yeah.
The way you described the black fraternity as being more violent, quote unquote, or bad, more bad, quote unquote, is racist.
May I piggyback on that?
I'm
Because
done.
I do have the black fraternity experience at an
Mm-hmm.
HBCU. And when I tell you that the hazing for predominantly, well, the hazing that happens at HBCUs is nowhere near the hazing that happens at predominantly white institutions. Okay. And the reason that is because the fraternities, the black fraternities that are on predominantly white institution campuses are mimicking the hazing that happens with white fraternities. Okay. So we can't even let's not even go there. The white fraternities are the the biggest culprits of hazing in the country. You just don't hear about it. You hear about it in the black organizations. Because I've had the benefit of being in both. And I was at Clark Atlanta University. I was also at Georgia State. And at Georgia State, man, those white boys, they were on some stuff. I mean, again, I had already pledged and done my thing at an HBCU. So when I went to Georgia State for my last 2 years of college, I was amazed because I believe that hype as well, that, you know, blacks are a little bit more aggressive. Nope, not
So
true.
so let's take this one step farther, because I think thank you, Nanette, for pointing this out. First of all, I do my best to not be a fragile white guy, and whether or not I succeed, I leave it up to you. The source of violence in North America is from white Europeans,
Hands down, hands down.
right? White Europeans brought scalping to North America. White Europeans brought the oppression and the inherent violence and rape of enslaving Black people to North America. Left to its own devices, and one of the things underlying my comments on this is that my encounters with African American culture are that African American culture is a more caring culture, a more supportive and communitarian culture than white American culture, even under pressure.
Especially under pressure.
Especially under pressure, right? And I've said it before, and I'll say it again here, this whole notion that white Americans counsel majority minority communities to be more resilient is the most horrendous, hypocritical
It's so
piece of
racist,
crap.
man. It is so racist when
Because
I hear that.
there are no people in this country who are more resilient than African Americans.
Yeah.
African Americans could teach white Americans about resilience.
Oh yeah.
Just
yeah.
like any immigrant population, be they, you know, initially Irish and Italian Americans. Let's talk about Chinese Americans, Japanese Americans who underwent internment.
Oh my gosh. Oh
right?
yeah.
Or the fact, you know, and I'm just rereading How to Hide an Empire, this book, which I adore because it's terrible and terrifying. You know, Native Indigenous Americans in Alaska who
Oh
were
man.
abandoned
Yeah.
after being colonized, abandoned during World War II to Japanese invasion. So,
Yep.
and then interned in their home,
In their homes.
in
Yeah.
their homes, and treated like like hostels, despite the fact that they had the highest percentage of National Guard enlistment of any population in the
Yeah.
country, except maybe the Japanese Americans in Hawaii and
Right.
when they were allowed to, as
Oh yeah.
opposed to in California. And the most decorated group of ethnic people in the country were the
Hmm.
Japanese American units in Europe.
Yep. Yep.
So this is some crazy ass crap that we deal with from white America on the resilience issue. And
Hmm.
again, back to our topic, violence in this country comes from white Americans.
Yeah. Particularly white men.
Well, when I say white Americans and violence, I mean white men.
Particularly, yeah, but particularly specifically white men and the progenitors. It reminds me of Wendell Pierce. Wendell Pierce.
Hmm.
He's an African American actor from Louisiana, and this was 15 years ago, I think. Yeah, 10 to 15 years ago. He was doing an interview about police brutality. There was a segment about police brutality, and they were interviewing him about his experiences because he had made some statements prior to that his showing at the news studio, and they wanted him to talk about it. And he told a story about him and his son, his young son. He had two sons. One son was in a car seat, and the other son was maybe 13, 14 years old, and how they got pulled over by the police. And from his perspective, all of a sudden, this cop is yelling and screaming and waving his gun in his face, in his kid's face. And he's trying to understand, whoa, what is the problem? And finally, he was able to de-escalate the situation. Basically, it was hot. It's New Orleans. It's hot. And he had the air conditioner running. And so the air conditioner was running on high. He couldn't hear. And so the cop was giving him instructions, but he didn't hear it. And so the cop immediately assumed that, oh yeah, right. He immediately assumed that something was wrong. So anyway, so the situation was de-escalated. Wendell asked the cop, why didn't you speak through the loudspeaker? Why didn't you use your microphone that we could hear you? He said, it's hot. You pulled me over. I was waiting for you to approach my vehicle. All you had to do was, let me know that you're coming. And he said that to say that all of this violence that has been assumed to come from the Black community it seems to be projection, because it's the white community, especially white males with badges, who are inflicting the most violence in the Black community, right? We don't talk about that. We talk about Black on Black crime. We talk about Black on Black aggression. But the reality of it is that this white male aggression against the Black community is really the larger number. And
Well, and even worse in this particular regard is, who are the people who are trained to be aggressive to whom in law enforcement settings, in
exactly,
military settings?
exactly.
Why do we have so many minority people signing up for the military and for law enforcement, and then are trained in institutions that have primarily been used as enforcers of armed force
Mhm.
against people of color?
People of color. Yeah,
Uh,
we're highly recruited. When I left the military, I got approached by several police forces. They came to me. They would call my house. They'd send me letters. Hey, you should join the police. Why
Right,
would
but
I
that's
want
not
to
even
do that?
talking about the socioeconomic forces that force uh, African Americans, Hispanic Americans, immigrant Americans into the idea that their citizenship will be affirmed and upheld
Yes,
via
they say
military
that.
service, that
Yeah,
their economic fate will
yeah,
be improved
yeah.
by military service because there are so few options that we've provided.
Oh yeah.
So all of these things, and in military service, and in law enforcement service, we create a culture of oppression of African Americans.
It is a culture, and I give you an example from my own experience. When I was maybe 8 months from processing out of the Marine Corps, they had attached me to a detail of Marines we were charged with training local law enforcement. And it was so revealing to me to be in a situation where we're supposed to be training the police officers, and we know how to de-escalate a situation. You can't tell me I don't know how to de-escalate when a person is bomb strapped to his body, and I know how to talk him down off the ledge. I know how to see a situation where there's a bomb inside of a car or a bomb on side of the road, and de-escalate the situation where no one gets hurt. I can do that. We've been trained to do that. So here we are, and I can't remember, Mariposa County, Arizona. We flew out to them to their training facility to teach them how to do security and stability operations, and we're telling them, don't shoot. No, don't shoot. Don't shoot. Like you don't have to shoot. You don't really have to shoot. Like you don't even have to reach for your gun. We said it so many times. We kept saying we don't understand why you guys are so eager to shoot. You don't have to. And I got to the point where I didn't want to participate anymore. I don't want to do this anymore, because you guys are, who are these people that you're allowing into your police force? Do they have mental problems? Like, it's human nature to want to defend yourself. I understand that. But if you're in a situation and you have the gun and they don't, what are you so afraid of?
Yeah,
You know,
so we need to get Pastor Scott Johnson in here to talk about the culture of law enforcement, because this is something I only know as a student from the outside and not an internal observer or
right.
scholar. Uh, Obviously, the history of American law enforcement is bad in this regard, because, of course, American law enforcement has its roots
In
in
slavery,
slave
man.
suppression,
Yep.
in slave recapture, in union suppression, right?
Mm,
The Pinkertons,
yeah.
who are the source of a significant amount of northern police force,
Yeah.
were primarily used to suppress unions.
Suppress the
So,
unions. They don't talk about that much.
and here here in Western New York, let's use a little mini example. How many different law enforcement agencies serve our neighborhoods? Too many,
I can say honestly, for Orchard Park, there are three.
right? So
Three,
at least.
at
So
least.
what three are you talking about in Orchard Park?
So you have the Village of Orchard Park Police Department. You have the Town of Orchard Park Police Department. Okay, so more than three. You you have City of Buffalo. Okay, you have the sheriff, which is different. You have the sheriff's department, which is different, and you have state troopers. So that's five.
Five.
That's
Five.
five.
That's not I remember a white former police officer watched on YouTube say the same thing, that former military and the police force are a lot less likely to pull out the gun because they feel more secure in their ability to de-escalate situations.
Exactly.
Right. And of course, we have trained law enforcement to say that if they feel afraid, they get to shoot.
Yes,
Be-
that was it. That's what we were
because
told.
this is the issue.
Yeah.
When a law enforcement officer feels in fear of their lives,
Mm,
they are justified in shooting first.
right.
And this is the culture we've created.
That's the culture that we created. Yeah.
Uh, and Chris says, here's the problem with two men talking about the scheduled topic. Most of the conversation has been about male violence. For sure. Thank you, Chris. So how would you rechannel us?
Well, I guess I think that, you know, the topic is about women and Vice President Harris, and while we can't necessarily talk about some of those pressures without talking about men, obviously we can't, but I think we need to more focus on if we're going to talk about men, we should be talking about men and their relationship with women rather than men and their relationship to violence or with each other.
Okay. So that being said, we have two different images of husbands at the head of the Democratic ticket in their relationship to women, right? We have Tim Walz, who, has portrayed sort of this more supportive masculinity. And we have Doug Emhoff, who has who is may yet be the most prominent Jewish man in the country at some point. So Chris, I ask you, what do you think of Mr. Emhoff's performance, as it were, because it is a performance, as second husband and as supporter of Kamala Harris, and how does this play in our rethinking of masculinity and femininity?
Well, I think that, he has exercised all the things we might hope he would exercise, right? That he has been vocally supportive of her, has been an apologist, if you will, for her motherhood, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but that's kind of what he's done. He's also been, right behind the Secret Service when there's been any sort of physical, I don't know, altercation or presumed physical threat. So and he's taken a step back from his career in order to be second husband. And that's not something that I think many people have really seen, is a man taking second place so that his wife can excel in her chosen career.
So given that, how do you perceive the difference between Vice President Harris as head of the ticket and Senator Clinton as head of the ticket in 2016?
Oh, so let's go back to Geraldine Ferraro.
Please.
So I was in Minnesota last week at the Minnesota State Fair, and I picked up my Harris Waltz buttons, a couple of them. And I did the same thing when Geraldine Ferraro was on the ticket. And so Geraldine Ferraro was married to a man who was in New York real estate. And the assumption was that a man in real estate in New York City had to be crooked, right? Had to be tied to, terrible forces. And that was played up pretty significantly in that campaign. And so, so they attacked Ferraro by attacking her husband. And I think the same thing happened in some respects. Now, there were other problems with the Clinton campaign, and, I don't want to redress all of those. But there was this undercurrent of, well, Bill Clinton is a slime and she's stuck with him. So she's probably a slime too, kind of a thing. And, and I don't know whether, and I'm sure that, the opposition has been looking very hard for dirt on Doug Emhoff that they could use in this campaign. And I think it's amazing that they haven't found anything that I've heard about anyway. But I think that, women who are running for public office have to carry their husband's reputation with them. That's just the way it is, right? I don't, hopefully that'll change at some time, but right now that's still the way it is. And so, yeah, so I think that's a big difference between Doug Emhoff and Bill Clinton as spouses. And I also, there was also, if I think back 8 years, there was a kind of ownership isn't quite the right word, but it was as if Bill Clinton were owning Hillary's success in this matter. And I don't see that, so he the smugness of him was like, oh yeah, it's all because of me that she can do this. And I don't see that with Doug Emhoff.
Well, and I think that's a significant difference in the two candidates because, of course, Hillary Clinton came to prominence as a spouse, and Kamala Harris has not come to prominence as a spouse. So I think that's a significant difference. I think it's very interesting the degree to which that you've pointed out that women's spouses are much more evaluated and there than men's spouses. You know, no one has, with the well, we can talk about the asterisks of Barack and Michelle Obama on every level, but prior to that, seldom do we see men presidential candidates evaluated on the merits or lack thereof of their wives. And interestingly enough, no, you disagree?
I
Why?
disagree. I disagree. I think
Please.
I guess maybe I'm seeing it differently, but I think I can think back. Well, can't think back as far as some of us in this group, but I can remember even Reagan's wife being criticized. I can remember people asking Reagan about his wife. I remember people asking the Bushes about their wives, and how, you know, comparing their wives to other presidents' wives. I see that. I saw that throughout the political discourse of the last 30, 40 years, that especially men, and then, yeah, with Obama, was more politicized and more propagandized, um, to a harsh degree, I think. But I thought, I always saw it as going both ways. I thought that Clinton was judged by his wife when when Bill was president, and then when Hillary was running for president, they judged her because of Bill, you know. And so I saw it going both ways. Maybe I
I,
just
I,
saw it differently.
and I guess I'll just say that the effect wasn't as significant on Bill Clinton. So, you know, Hillary said, you know, I've got to go bake some cookies, right? And people were, you know, annoyed with her about that stuff, but it didn't affect how they felt about Bill very much. So
And I think, I mean, Pastor Hughes and I, as male clergy people, I believe, have interviewed for jobs with our spouses that
Oh
are,
yeah.
and certainly in the rabbinic world, there's a very interesting double standard in that regard, which is that a cis heterosexual man is most likely going to attend an interview, an in-person interview. Almost all of my in-person rabbinical interviews have been with Ginny, and whereas women rabbis are not asked the same. And what you've pointed out is that it's flipped at the head of our society. That actually the extra level of evaluation, if Doug Emhoff is not perfect, it would be a problem. And then I think the question of Kamala Harris's motherhood, or is a very interesting one. And you know, my initial question on this was, how is Vice President Harris's candidacy forcing us all, I think, to update our thinking about femininity and power? You know, how comfortable are we being led by women, and how absurd are the critiques of her now being made to seem? Like this Fox News host, Jesse, whatever his name is, who said that, you know, he wanted to see her in the situation eaten alive by the generals in the Situation Room. Like somehow or another, potentially President Harris would not be able to hold her own in a room of military heads talking about crisis on the ground.
Well, you have to consider the source, man. I mean, consider the source. I mean, their ilk would have that mentality about any woman, right? So, you know, you have to kind of consider the source. I think there's a general consensus that is also divided along the same political lines. You know, just like your article, the excerpt that you read at the beginning of the show. You know, the Republican Party has their opinions. They have their opinions about the validity of Kamala Harris. They're questioning her legitimacy as a candidate based on the Dred Scott decision. They're questioning the validity of her race, her ethnicity. They're questioning everything, right? Because that's kind of what they do. And then, you know, on the Democratic side, we're embracing all of it because that's sort of what is expected of Democrats as well. So I kind of think on that aspect, it's the, you know, it's the source, man. It's people project.
I mean, this guy Jesse went so far that even Judge Pirro said resisted his analysis.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Right?
Even they know they're going too far. Right?
So, but I wonder. I mean, you know, my initial question on this is really: have we seen a shift in public consciousness? Because I don't think I don't think it's acceptable. I'm hopeful it's not acceptable to question Kamala Harris's bona fides in stepping into the Situation Room as head of our country. And I think that's a relatively new majority consciousness, despite the fact that it shouldn't be. It should be, right? Heads of state around the world have been women for decades. Please, Nanette.
So when they talk about that, her being challenged in the Situation Room, we really have to look at when she's sitting in that chair. You're not talking to a woman, you're not talking to a man, you're talking to that office.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to be pushed more. The idea that we or anyone would give her less deference because she's a woman. It's the office that you know that commands the respect. It's the office that's sitting there making those decisions. I think that needs to be said more.
I agree.
I appreciate that, Nanette. And however, what we've seen from the right wing is the degree to which there is, in fact, no deference to the office if they don't like the person in the office. So up to the Supreme Court that has decided that that office has full latitude to do whatever it wants legally if it were held by Donald Trump.
Right.
But were Joe Biden to exercise the same liberties with the office, you can bet, I mean, it's a sucker's bet, that the Supreme Court would absolutely clamp down on executive power like they have with regard to student loans.
Right.
So, you know, that's even a more interesting question when faced with a woman of color as president of the United States. Yes, of course, Barb, you're right. She's been in the Situation Room as VP, and which is why the absurdity of the accusation is crazy, and the absurdity that somebody thinks it's okay to say it. Right? Here we are in this backlash maelstrom right now. Right? We are in a perfect storm of backlash and progress that, you know, started in 2008 with Barack Obama's candidacy and the Tea Party reaction to it, and Donald Trump's rise to prominence on questioning Barack Obama's citizenship. All of that. This is now spun so far. So it's not that we've gotten so extreme, it's that the extremes have been illustrated.
Yeah.
So Chris, I hope we did a good job of accepting correction.
Thank you. I think it's probably time to make sure everybody else has a chance to talk about the topic.
It is. That's why I turn to you. I really, you know, we did not want to have this conversation without a woman leading us. And Dr. Acheson had to step away because she has a new position and lots of pressures thereof. So we accepted that wholeheartedly, but we didn't want to cancel our talk today. So we've heard from Chris, you know, and Nanette, Allison, Barb, Tay. Any other questions or thoughts on any of these topics? I mean, we've gone quite far afield in all of our tangents.
Do we just do it in the chat or can we speak?
No, you can all unmute yourselves now. You can even start video if you'd like.
Okay. I just want to say that several things, many things stand out as I listen to the conversation. One is go to the source. I went to Vassar College and that was hammered into us. Go to the source. And that's where you will get the true information. I hadn't thought of this weighing the candidates' spouses and what they say and judging them. That was a revelation to me as you talked about that. I want to say that revelations come to me all the time. We were at Chautauqua and we heard a woman rabbi, first woman rabbi in all of Canada, speak. And she was certainly a feminist. And she asked the question, how come we say woman rabbi? We don't say male rabbi. And we do that all the time. You know, it's always the first woman well, it's valid that it's the first woman to take a position and that's that. But to always say a woman rabbi instead of a male rabbi, just say rabbi, or in most other offices too. The other thing that stood out to me was saying, what would Kamala Harris do in the Situation Room? And it's been pointed out that she's been there before and she would be president, not woman necessarily. So I don't have anything new, but I wanted to bring up the woman rabbi thing. And I also wanted to just comment on what I hear today, which is very rich, very important, and very thought-provoking. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Allison. And as somebody who went to a rabbinical seminary where 2/3 of the students were women when I was there, 1/3 of them were lesbian or bisexual. So, I mean, 1/3 of the school, so half of the women. We had a very large LGBTQ population. So rabbinic culture has changed, but it's also very diverse, right? Mm-hmm. The range and depth of differences among rabbis in Jewish communities is a rich and colorful tapestry. And right now, one where we are arguing more than ever with one another. So there are plenty of divisions in a very small population. It's hard to believe there are fewer than probably 17 million Jews in the world and probably about 10 million different movements.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's important for us all to know. Thank you.
Other thoughts, questions?
I have a comment.
Please, Barb.
This is Barb.
Yes.
Okay. You know, identifying gender, it's no different than when you speak about sexuality. I mean, nobody says, you know, they'll say, oh, a gay man, but they won't say a heterosexual man. You know, it's never discussed like that. Yeah. And it's the same thing in the medical field. Oftentimes you'll hear people refer to, oh, I go to a woman doctor. Mm-hmm. You know, nobody says, oh, I go to a male doctor. That's it. Yeah. You know, it's
no, it's absolutely
I don't know what
true.
more to say about it, but we do seem to, you know, to do that in a number of different areas.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Tay.
Well, two things. A little follow-up on what Barb and Allison were just saying. I certainly remember, certainly in my 20s, and I think even older than that, I was a chemistry major, got a PhD in chemistry, and you'd be talking with guys and stuff. And or a group of people, even women, the topic would come up, you know, oh, so what did you study in college? You know, before they knew my background. I said, oh, I was chemistry major. Chemistry, really? And nobody would have said that to a guy. If he said he was a chemistry major, they'd say, oh, that's cool, or something like that. And certainly other friends who were in similar fields. One of my students who worked for NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, her first session with the people she was working with, all men, sitting in the circle talking about something. And she said, they talk to me in baby talk. And then she said something about her class she had in some engineering field. She double majored in English and engineering, actually, material science engineering, I think. Anyway, she said something about something from her engineering class, and they said, what? You know about this? And they never would have said that to a guy. But the cool thing I think about, well, obviously I like Kamala Harris. But one of the things that kind of fascinates me when I've heard, well, first of all, her background, even before she was vice president or when she was involved in Congress, she was the attorney general of her state, California, something like that. And, I don't think people expect a woman to be the attorney general of their state either. I'm sure she's been listening to this for a long time. But if I just heard her talking and didn't see her on some of the talks I've heard her talk, I'd almost swear it was a man talking. She doesn't sound any different from the way a man would talk about something. And she certainly seems to have a lot of confidence. Well, obviously, if you're an attorney general, you're very used to getting up and talking. And she certainly comes across as every bit as confident. So I'm hoping that it will get across to people that, hey, women can do this too. I spent a lot of my teaching time trying to convince the girls that, hey, you can go into science, math, engineering. You're just as good as the guys. And
so on that topic, Tay and Allison and Barb and Chris and Nanette, it seems that you agree, therefore, with Vice President Harris's response to the question of she was asked in the interview last week regarding Trump's attacks on her for being a woman and for being a Black woman, and she said, basically same old thing. It's nothing new. And then was asked, is that all you have to say about it? And she said, yes, that's all I have to say about it. So I presume that all of you would agree with that particular response.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure she'd been hearing that. And one of the things that fascinates me, my niece who went to law school in her 40s was telling me that over half of the students in law school now are women. And I never, when I was in college, hardly any of my friends thought girls could become lawyers. No, you might be a lawyer's secretary or assistant, but it's things are progressing, I guess, but it hasn't changed totally.
And Nanette, you want to say something?
Yeah, I was thinking of a couple of years back, Michael Vick, not Michael Vick. He was the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons.
Yes, Michael
and this one was the one after Michael. I forgot his name, but he was asked a question by a woman reporter, really sophisticated question. And he stopped for a second and he said, wow, I'm just not used to hearing a question about the such and such defense coming from a woman. And then he went ahead and he answered it. And he got a lot of crap for that. And, honestly, I felt like, people, back up. And let's all take a breather here and just be honest about how new it is to have women sports reporters.
Yeah. So Matt Ryan.
Let's have a little grace and just back up a little bit. It's kind of how I felt about that. But people just dug right in. And I'm saying that because we're talking a lot about people being acknowledged as woman this or woman that.
Yeah.
And there's a catch-22 with that. There's in one, it recognizes that there is a prejudice when we are acknowledging this position as being filled by a woman, where we wouldn't if this position was filled by a man. And on the other hand, there's some newness to some of these. And, you know, we got to have a little bit of grace about it. I mean, me personally, I really feel like we put too, I'm going to sound crazy saying this, but I believe we put too much stock in our presidency. We get a different one every 4 years. The pendulum swings. There's a consistency that is America, quote unquote. And that's what we really need to focus on. And we put a different leader at the helm, but there's a consistency that is America. So there's that. And really, my only interest, well, I've got two interests in the current presidential race. One, that we get rid of Trump. And two, the excitement that we're about to have our first woman president and she's Black.
Yeah.
You know, other than that, I don't give a blank. It's the same old as far as I'm concerned. It really is. But that's the main draw for me. Damn it, we about to have our first woman president and she's Black. Oh, snap.
Yeah, Tay, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, one thing that just came into my head, and I agree with Nanette about everything, is that there are also things, biases against guys. My son, who called himself a mathlete, not an athlete, was bullied as all the way through high school. In fact, really bullied in high school. And I once taught nursing chemistry many, many years back, but still there were like, I think 2 young men in the class, and the rest of the class was all women. I mean, how many men think about going into nursing when they're, you know, or other fields like that? I mean, dancing or things like that, music even.
Charlotte, don't turn this into, oh, white guys too. Don't. I'm sorry, this is our turn.
Okay.
And I agree on that. On that topic, Nanette. However, we did have years where it was the first Black quarterback in the NFL. So, and God willing, someday there will be a first woman quarterback in the NFL as well. However, I think
that'd be crazy.
Well, women's basketball is making progress anyway.
But I think the key element that Chris reminded us of initially is, you know, I was brought to this question because of, honestly, my experience in watching African-American ministers who were women face incredible challenges among leadership, especially with African-American male minister leaders. And that, you know, so this is a question in my mind, and I you know, was never going to ambush Pastor Hughes with that without giving him some time to think about it ahead of time. But that's what inspired me to get Dr. Acheson to join us today, and unfortunately she couldn't be here. But I think this continues to be an open question. Pastor Hughes, you wanted to say something in that regard?
Well, I mean, nothing outside of the fact that most African Americans are traditionally very conservative, theologically, politically. We're mostly, especially theologically, especially when it comes to religion, Black African Americans can be very, very conservative, and so that conservatism plays out a lot in church. And so there's scriptures that many Black church leaders will cite that prohibits women from certain places of leadership. Women shouldn't be able to talk in the church. Women shouldn't be able to blah blah blah, according to certain scriptures. But I've never observed that same level of prohibition outside of the church, right? Like, I've never known African Americans to say, well, a woman can't be a senator or a woman can't be a congressman. I mean, Shirley Chisholm ran for president, what, 88? Was that 88, I think?
No, I think in 80.
It was 80.
Oh.
Good Lord. Even okay, so in the 80s. So I think you know, African Americans, we tend to draw a line here. We separate church and state, right? And you know, a black woman can do whatever she wants out there, but when she comes to church, she can't wear pants. She has to wear a skirt, and she
Yeah.
you know she has to. And some churches say you have to have your head covered.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cultural nuance
Mm.
there as well.
Yeah.
Really quickly, I do remember the first time I wore pants to a black church, people looked at me like, I know we said casual, but damn.
So I was wrong.
Really did.
Shirley
They
Chisholm.
really did. They looked at me funky.
Shirley Chisholm ran for the presidential nomination in 1972 in the Democratic Party. So, so it's 1 o'clock. I want to thank all of you for joining us for this fruitful discussion. I really want to continue these thoughts because I think what we looked at. Yes, please,
Rabbi,
Nanette.
could I get an answer to the question that I put in the chat before you close up?
An example of what I'm talking about with regard to what?
You say you examples where you've seen black women pastors put through the ringer differently than black men pastors.
So, in my time at Voice Buffalo,
Mhm.
you know, working for Reverend Denise Walden
Reverend
Glenn,
Denise, yeah.
Reverend Denise was often treated horrifically
Mm.
by African American male pastors, and often as were other African American women leaders. In the wake of 514, physically pushed aside in gatherings, and that's not even talking about organizational situations. So so I know that I don't know anything about this except one little glimmer into a world that is not my world, which is why, you know, I try to lean on experts and those who have experience in worlds that are not mine. So, which is where we try to go all the time. And Pastor Hughes and I are doing our best to bring in other scholars and other thinkers into this conversation, and we will continue to do so. We will always take your suggestions for what we should do and what we should talk about. And because this is not us talking to you, but us talking with you, the only way change happens is with one another. And that is another thing I learned from Reverend Denise primarily, but from a lot of people. With that, we are definitely scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Our topic for 2 weeks from now is somewhat open-ended. What we have scheduled for 2 weeks from now on September 18th is a book that I heard about by a scholar named Ari Berman called Minority Rule, The Right-Wing Attack on the Will of the People and the Fight to Resist It, which I thought sounded pretty interesting. I have a couple of other things in my list, but is there anything in particular that all of you who are here would like us to consider? You know,
New shoes, new fall shoes.
new fall shoes. With that, Pastor Hughes, any closing thoughts?
No. This was good. This was a lively discussion.
So I urge everyone to go out and register people to vote. I urge us all to sign up and serve as election workers because the election worker population is really struggling right now. There are opportunities to do election protection in states where the election is under threat, like in Pennsylvania and Ohio, which are nearby for us. So if you want to get in a bus and do that. And while we seem to, I have a dream of mobilizing our group here to do, I haven't quite gathered the resources in the organization for it, for new types of freedom rides, where we go into states where books are banned and do banned book
Ooh,
readings
that's an interesting thing.
in cooperation with local libraries. So I'm working on exploring that as well. Keep on sending us suggestions and comments. Thank you all. I wish all of us blessings as this fall begins, as this final quarter of 2024, and hope that it continues forward together. Thank you all so very much.